Welcome to our guests. We'll introduce them in a little bit here. We'll have them introduce themselves. And we're going to cover a few different things. I want to start, though, so we're going to jump around the agenda. I apologize to anyone who really cares about that much. The agendas will look pretty much the same all the time, except if we have different guests come in. But we'll get to the committee timeline in a moment. But we've got our website up on the screen right now, and I'm going to defer to Mallory for a moment so she can show you where you find the things, most of what's in here, right? I'll let you explain that.
Okay, so this is fargomoorhead.org /convention-center. So it's only visible by searching the menu button and then searching it. So it's not like a live link on our homepage. So obviously those of you on the committee have easy access to it, media and.
Oh, someone's online. Hello?
Oh, okay, we'll just continue. So everything is on one page. So we have a microsite of everything with some links to jump from here to there. So you'll see this is just kind of an introduction, a list of the committee members, and then these are hot button links that jump down a little bit. So we've got listed out, this should open up, excuse me, a link to our agendas and meeting minutes once those are posted. And then below that, we've got resources and other documents. So again, when we were kind of going through all of those CompSet convention centers around the region, this just gives you a brief overview of their space. And then each of those is linked to their website as well, so it's easily accessible. Then it goes through our local event venues here in Fargo, and then into the lost business that we've come across just because of lack of space. So things that we're unable to accommodate, conventions who have outgrown Fargo, and then those that we could lose in the future. So this one I like to point out that there's a list of the direct visitor spending. Now this is approximate and always conservative, as we say, Charlie. So lots of dollars left on the table for that. There's a full list of all of those conventions and a lot more data if you're wanting to drill down a little bit more. And then last but not least, we've got a list of frequently asked questions. This is probably gonna change as we go along throughout the process. So if there's questions that you may have or questions that the general public might have, this will answer those questions. So obviously why does Fargo need a convention center? We've got our campaign videos listed there as well. How does the lodging tax work? Again, that information, it's a 30-second clip on how lodging tax works. Where will the convention center be located and who will decide? Obviously, that's those of us in the room. What will the economic impact be? Another video about that. And then last but not least is what is the timeline? So that actually leads us into the next, if we do keep with the agenda, right, Charlie?
We will, but we're going to, thank you, Mallory. We're going to slip in a quick round of introductions since we do have some guests at the table. So I'm Charlie Johnson, President and CEO of Visit Fargo Moorhead.
Mallory Ackerman, Visit Fargo Moorhead.
I'm Mike Redlinger, City of Fargo staff.
Kate Ballstead, Southeast Education Cooperative.
Hi, I'm Jaquel Hoffman. I'm with Ronald McDonald House Charities of the Red River Valley.
Hi, I'm Brianna Nipdahl with United Way of Cass Clay.
Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo.
Michelle Turnberg, City Commissioner.
Nicolette Bresnahan, Fargo Moorhead, West Fargo Chamber.
Peyton Watson Moorhart, also a part of the chamber.
Denise Kolpak, Fargo City Commission.
Erin Prochnow, YWCA.
Joe Raso, Greater Fargo Moorhead, EDC.
Taylor Snelling, owner of Mezzaluna.
Kent Kolstad, President, Livewire.
Dave Pepcorn, City Commission.
Claire Hughes, GM of the Clubhouse Hotel and Suites.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And we'll get to our guests here in a couple of minutes. So you wanted to run to, you said we'd segue to the timeline, right?
Sure.
Is this on the website?
The calendar is not, but the key dates are on the website, yes. So they don't list out all of our committee meetings just because that's listed above.
Yeah.
So the key dates. So I'll just run through it really, really fast.
And I forgot to, Eric Johnson's here. Thank you, Eric.
Oh.
Sorry, I didn't let you introduce yourself, but there he is. He's up in the corner. Okay. Is there someone else online?
Okay. All right, so as you can see, this is the next 6 months. Anything in black is what we have confirmed to be on the agenda. So obviously the first few of our committee meetings and then our travel to St. Cloud and Rochester the first week, or excuse me, the first part of the 24th and 25th that week. So those things that are circled are for sure happening. The red dates, if you notice on the bottom, that is tentative. So the idea being we'll be meeting weekly through the end of May. The date is April 30th for the time that we want to actually send the RFP to developers. You'll notice the next red date is May 30th, which is when we would like to get all questions of interest that are due. So if any developers have interest but need some more information from us. And then after that, we'll start meeting, excuse me, ideally every other week for June and July. And then the end of July, the 31st, are when proposals are due. And then since we will then reconvene weekly to discuss the proposals. Any questions?
That's all. The last half of that is all very tentative because we don't know exactly how things are going to go. Mallory referred to something there during the month. If we are able to get the RFP out by the end of April, a discussion I had with our friends at HVS, who we have contracted to do a study for us this week, suggested that in the first 30 days after you put these out, you should allow developers, to be able to call and have questions and submit questions that we could answer. So that's what's reflected there. So that will be done. That study, which is aimed at, here, I brought it along. I'll tell you exactly what they're going to do. The market assessment document will include the following elements. Key market variables and economic and demographic data highlighting positives for Fargo as an event destination. Data on local and regional competitive venues that host meetings and conventions, including a map of the venues, high-level demand projections by type of event for the proposed new center, high-level forecast of financial operations for the proposed new center, historical lodging tax collection data from the 3% tax, the role of Visit Fargo Moorhead in selling the space in the proposed new convention center, and then they will help us identify some site selection criteria that we can use. And also in addition to this, for part of this contract, Tom Hazinski at HVS told me that they would be happy to serve in a consulting basis if we need them to going forward. So, and his timeline for this is about 6 weeks. So I signed the contract yesterday. Visit Fargo Moorhead is paying for this, and hopefully we'll have it by mid-April, finished, a draft at least by mid-April. So ultimately the idea will be to include in the RFP a link to this study for developers to look at. Any questions about that?
Charlie, is there an opportunity to get the site selection criteria sooner or have a discussion around that? I assume the developers would want to understand as early as possible how we in the commission are going to weigh various aspects of this.
Yeah, I think we'll put that probably on one of our next couple of agendas and try to make that, you're right, that's something we need to pin down, but we can, and likewise, we can consult with HVS on that too, show it to them and see what they think. So maybe, I don't know what you think, maybe I'd ask them for a preview of that ahead of time that we could use as a discussion basis. So go from there.
Yeah, I think that, and if any of the sites we're visiting in any of the analysis that they did included their criteria, it might be good to have that. I'm going to guess they'll overlap quite a bit, but
yeah,
it would be nice to know.
Yes, sir, Mayor.
Joe, do you have, for instance, we have 5 proposals in front of us, like when you guys pick a site for somebody. Is there a way we can rate or point them out? For instance, if we go on one site, we may pay $6 million for the land or something, or $4 million or whatever. We only have $40 million for the convention center, so it would detract from the convention center. So my curiosity is, what would be best site? Like when we put in stuff, utilities or water or decreasing cost. But to me, a lot of times, whatever we pick for a site, there may be some costs that come away from the $40 million we got for the convention center. So is there like a rating, like you'd go, you have 5 locations a company could go and you say -5 for this, +10 for this, or something like that. that we could utilize in this? Because to me, that's part of it, because let's say we pick a site and it's $1 million a year that it costs us to run the place, and another site and it's at 200,000, that's points. We'd probably pick the 200,000 over the million. But is there kind of some modality or functionality that we can figure out that, I'm just used to like the Renaissance Zone and different things when Dave does TIF or pilot, we have rankings and they'll get 100 points or 120 points or something like that. And oftentimes it helps us sort out the developer to pick the top 3 because you're giving them points for certain parts.
Correct.
And if you're competitive, right, if you're a developer and their land is worth $2 million, if you give it to us for free or, 100,000, that flavors what we choose or not choose in that. If another one is 2 million and they're both 2 million and the one drops to 100,000, you might pick the 100,000 one, right?
Yeah, and Mayor, I think, my comment to Charlie and what the team's working on or the consultants, I think gets to exactly what you're raising. It's, in our work with primary sector companies, they're driving the criteria, and it's a matter of whether the site, the community, the region fits that well enough. And we obviously know what a lot of those variables are. I think with the work that the CVB does and these convention centers, these consultants, that more than anything like you, I want to know what the criteria are, and then what does this committee do in terms of the weight that it wants to place on. I mean, this is being done to drive convention center activity. So how much weight is on that and its attributes versus anything else a developer might bring in? Access to the site. How much weight do we want to put on that and showcase to the developers? That might be worth 15% of the overall decision-making or weighting. So to your point, this is, I think, really going to be critical to the developers to understand what our criteria are and the weighting for them to then marry up their project to that.
Yeah. So what I'm taking from this is we'll do some work on this next week and have that as a discussion point for our next meeting. Sample things that might be included. And I'll talk to HVS, but I'll also do a little other research too, see what we can find out. So we'll put that on the agenda for next week. Okay. Okay. Let's involve our guests here. At our last meeting, we were talking about a lot of things, meeting requirements, space requirements, but we wanted to make sure we took the temperature of the local event planner community, and that's why we've picked some of you to be here. And we really would like to know what kind of problems, issues you run into, if you do locally, or what things you see locally that you like, what things do you think you're going to need in the future. And it's kind of open to your interpretation of those kinds of things. So we'd like to hear from each of you about that sort of thing. I'm just going to arbitrarily start with Aaron. How's that? Aaron Prochnow from YWCA.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks for having us. We host a series of events to support our mission locally each year, and some space constraints absolutely exist, primarily with our Women of the Year event. And so when I gauged our team's reaction to your question posed to us, Charlie, some of the things that are lacking is adequate space to be able to have 1,000+ people in a room at tables. And in addition to that, the challenges that exist with how we are able to raise funds and some of the state laws around raffle permits and those kinds of things, you need heavy access to ATMs on site because that has to happen with cash. And so you can't use a card to do a lot of those things. And so we've, for our event coming up at the end of April, are bringing in extra ATMs to the local hotel we're utilizing to make certain that the cash is there to be able to come out on the other end. So the access to cash is significant to follow those state laws. In addition to that, some of the liquor laws and some of the local organizations and businesses want to help nonprofit organizations, and there's a lot of us around the table by contributing some of the wine or some of those pieces. And so the excess fees that local vendors charge make it counterproductive to actually even accept that contribution of that local business trying to be helpful in raising more dollars at our events. I think when you get down to detail for us, We serve a lot of women. There's a lot of women that come to our events. And so when we're talking about restroom facilities, we need more women's restrooms than men's restrooms. I think we see that in other venues across the community as well. And then vendor flexibility. I think this is the most important one that our team brought forward to me, is that many local vendors today are requiring you to use food on site at their location, their AV company. You can't bring an outside group. Like Kent's group has been a hired vendor to YWCA for a long time and does an exceptional job delivering those services. Moving forward in contracts with local vendors that we utilize today, we're not going to be able to utilize Kent's services because they're on site at that local hotel or at that local establishment, which limits our ability to have some level of choice in our decision-making for our business in a longstanding partnership that we have with an exceptional firm. And so that relates to AV needs, that relates to food, that relates to liquor, all of those things. And they'd all need to be licensed and be able to prove themselves. But to have an array of those options available rather than locked in on one specifically provides us some level of flexibility in utilizing a host of community businesses across the Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo area. Obviously, parking is a significant issue. I know we don't need oftentimes some of those larger adjacent rooms to bring in larger conferences and those kinds of things, but others certainly need that in terms of adjacent spaces. So Woman of the Year is one of the events we do. Chocolate for Change is another that could potentially be utilized. And occasionally we'll host a nationwide speaker coming in similar to the Chamber. And we hosted Ashley Judd a couple of years ago and did a women's empowerment event. And we could have used a larger space for that as well. So there's a host of events we could utilize at YWCA in a space that's larger than what exists today in our community. Flexibility, I think, is the most important component.
Okay, I think we've talked about almost everything you brought up at some point. So this is good to know that this is what you're interested in, especially the idea of.
It's about ATMs. I thought that
No,
might be-
no, that is true. I'm going to give you that one. I did not think of that one. No one said that before. So, yeah, how many of us use cash anymore? I like ATMs. I'm always looking for one. That was a brand new thing. But I was thinking also about the idea of vendors, and we talked some about that last week. Some of these things, we're going to leave some space in the RFP to see what people propose, but that's one of the things that I think a lot of people are going to talk about. So thank you for that. Before we move on, anybody have any questions for Erin? Okay.
I do.
Yes,
Really quick.
Claire.
Erin, what, you said 1,000 plus. Is that about for the larger ones that you do? Is that about the amount of people?
We host a series of smaller events as well, but those are adequate at local spaces that exist today. I think the events that I talked about, the 3 events I just talked about, would be the events that we would have at YWCA. And our Woman of the Year event could be over 1,000 people.
Oh.
And it can't be today.
Right. Okay.
So you're saying these events could grow if you had more space?
Yes.
Yes, okay. That's
Sorry, I didn't say what you wanted me to. Yes, we could grow if we had more space.
okay. All right. Any other questions for Erin? Okay, who'd like to go next?
Yeah. I was gonna say.
Yeah, okay. Let's go to Jaquel.
Well, Erin, you did a great job in summarizing a lot of what was on our list. I think just to piggyback a couple of things, I think parking is a big issue. And my next one is winter needs. We host our largest fundraiser in February, and so to get 800 people to park at our current venue with snow piles and, drop people off in high heels and dressed up gear. So I would urge you to think about the season of winter, coat check, coat racks. What does that look like to make that a part of our demographic? Because I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to host things here in the winter that bring people to Fargo and see it. So that would be something I would add to your list. I think aesthetics, I think we're pigeonholed too. I mean, we had 800 people at our last gala. We could easily have more and sell more tickets had we had a space that could be bigger. When you add tables and silent auction and live auction and bars, right, there's not a lot of movement. So I think a lot of flexibility, but also an aesthetically pleasing space that can do some fun things with backdrops and lighting so that we can take our investment and work with our vendors like Livewire and say, what else can we do to make this better? I think would be a huge drawing point. And really the flexibility of space, getting creative and being able to do some fun things. I think we've been really limited with what we've been able to do and have to necessarily fit our events and needs into the space and not think bold and creative about how we do what's best for our mission and ultimately our community and bring revenue in. So I think flexibility would, again, be a big thing. The vendor issue, I think, is huge. Having some flexibility and being able to leverage some contracts and partnerships. We live in a very generous community, and so to be able to build relationships with people and ask them to do good things for good causes in our community is really important.
Can I ask, when you said winter and the events, for any of you, are you thinking of outdoor coverage where cars can pull up, drop people off, and enough of that, or?
I think just, I don't think that isn't necessarily. Would it be nice? Absolutely. Is it worth the cost? I'll let you decide. But I think multiple entrances that people can come into, parking that, sidewalks being cleared and having them walk in safe spaces. And, I don't think there is a good venue right now that offers a space in the winter for people to get there safely without trekking across a parking lot, a gravel road. And I think we live in a place where there's a lot of winter. And so I think just thinking really thoughtfully about what that entrance situation looks like, what the parking access is for people, not only that are able to walk, but mobility challenges of getting wheelchairs and other things into spaces safely.
Good stuff. Thank you. Brianna?
I think having Erin go first was amazing, but also tough at the same time because she talked to a lot of our things as well. Flexibility with the vendors is a huge piece of it. We have great partnerships throughout the area, and some of that is a little limited when you're working with a vendor that is maybe required to work within that space and they maybe don't have those local roots here. And so working with them on sponsorships or trades, they may not value that as much as our local vendors here locally. So that's a big piece of it. I would echo parking. We haven't yet, or at least not in a few years, have we outgrown our vendor, our local biggest vendor with our luncheon. We were at 800 and then we backed down. Now we're about 600. So we still have some space there before we max that one out. But I hope to think that in a couple of years, we're back up to that 800, 900 plus where it's going to be really tight again to host that event. But I also, the parking is a huge piece, as I keep in mind, even like our school supply drive, where that maybe isn't your typical attendees in the room around a table. But right now we're fortunate enough to be able to host the school supply drive at the Fargo Dome, and it's worked well. But we're kind of lenient on their calendar because I don't have budget to pay to be in a space for 2 weeks at a time. And if the Fargo Dome wasn't able to work with us on that, we'd probably be back at Shields Arena, which again is another venue that's incredible, but their parking lot was not great to have 900 cars come through distribution at a time, and we had parking backed up on 32nd, up 45th, trying to have families get access to our drive when we held it at Shields Arena. So I think as you look at site selection, as you look at traffic flow and things like that, as you're getting 1,000 vehicles to come in for an event, I think it's something to keep in mind. Yeah, that's probably what I have to add to the amazing points that have already been made.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for anyone before we move on? Okay, so the chamber is here. We love, and you have, I've quoted many times to people that we can't even have space for things that the chamber does. So I'm here to find out if you're going to back me up on this. Peyton?
Yes, thank you, Charlie and Mallory, for inviting us. Nicolette and myself here representing the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber of Commerce today. I was going through our 2025 calendar, and the chamber will host about 90 events and programs on our calendar this year. 15 of those being our larger or signature styled events where we'll have 400 plus attendees at those. Right now in 2025, we're looking at probably 6 to 7 hour events that are starting to max out the space in which we are in right now. Some notes that I jotted after receiving Charlie and Mallory's email. Venue affordability, the cost of venues in Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo right now can be a restraint for community organizations to get into them. So that was another thing that Aaron really highlighted well was vendor flexibility. We've got a great partnership with Kent and the Livewire team, and so making sure that we're able to continue utilizing them and leveraging different partnerships that we already have established. Another thing was in-house catering versus preferred caterers. Most of the complaints that we receive on our post-event surveys come from complaints on the venue itself or the food that is served, which is really hard as an organization putting on the events because it's not us serving the food, it's the establishment. So that's been a really big thing, is quality of food. Bar services, I know Aaron mentioned that. Some other things, having a green room or a space for speakers to get ready before events is a big thing. We run into that at a few different local venues in town. Tables and chairs, making sure that we have those in-house. It's just an added expense when we're having to bring in another venue to provide those, so it's really nice when the venues already have those in stock, if you will, along with linens and that sort of thing. Drink ticket process is another major thing, along with the bar services. We've run into some troubles with different venues in Fargo and what their drink ticket process looks like. Let's see what else. Parking, similar to everybody else, we receive that on almost every single one of our surveys. So that's been a big thing. I know Aaron mentioned that they don't really have a need for it, but we do, just adjacent spaces and sizes of different rooms. Some of our larger scale events will have requirements for a meeting to be off to the side or a pre-event to take place, a VIP social, that sort of thing. So making sure that there are different sized spaces. In-house audio and AV system available for smaller scale events where we're not needing to bring in necessarily a production team, but making sure that those are put in place for organizations. Food costs, as a nonprofit organization in the community, this is huge for us. And a problem that we've run into recently with a lot of different venues as well, working with them on affordable food costs. Having a load-in area for larger events, not utilizing main doors, but having a back-end place for load-in. And then the biggest thing with a lot of venues is in town, and there are some great ones, but just making sure we're putting the right people in the right seats as far as a coordinator and who's working with event contacts in the community. Events, people that aren't familiar with them, there's a lot of different things that go into coordinating and planning them. So making sure that we've got the right people in the right seat as far as who's working with the organizations in the community. That was a long list.
That's a great list. Nicolette, anything you want to add to that from your experience?
I don't think so. Peyton did a great job. One thing just to note about the food costs is that inherently affects the bottom budget because of what we have to charge people to come, right? So if we're paying with tax and gratuity $38 for a plated breakfast for a 2-hour event, it gets astronomical to expect our attendees to pay $40 for a breakfast. So I'd say that's a big one. And I know food costs are going up, so I don't know how we're gonna fix that problem in this meeting, but yeah.
No, we're not.
We're not, right?
No, that's, yeah, I understand that. Everybody feels that pain. I don't, hopefully we can do something about that, but especially if we're using different, if it turns out that we have preferred or multiple vendors, that would allow you at least to shop around a little bit. I think that's probably the best outcome we could have to that, right? I think so, yeah. Okay, questions for any of these folks? Dave?
I have a question for all of the people. So if you talk about parking and obviously in the wintertime, so in your ideal view, do you think we would have like an attached where you can actually get into the venue without having to go on sidewalks? Like if there was ideally maybe a parking, something like that. Can you just talk about that? Because it's not only accessibility for people with challenges, but also seniors and just people in general not walking on ice. So maybe, what would be your view of what the ideal thing would be?
I mean, ideally, yes, that would be wonderful. I think, is the cost benefit there? Are we realistic about a great space or a great parking lot, right? Those aren't cheap, they're expensive. I think if it's feasible, I think that would absolutely be a draw. I think about times that even, having a winter coat and where do you put it, and, some of the challenges of just not having to go outside. But again, I wouldn't rate that if you're gonna do a scale on like a must-have. I think I would be more concerned about, I find that most places throw their snow piles in the most convenient parking spots right by the entry. So I think some of that is just more accessibility, easy drop-off points, multiple drop-off points.
If I can, so like to me, like an enclosed drop-off area that is not enclosed all the way around, but just covered, so when it's snowing or raining or icy, you still have an area that's level that people can be dropped off at. So that would be probably the most cost-effective one, but ideally would also have some extra actually enclosed parking spots where you would not have to go out into the elements. So, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's I don't know if that makes sense. To give you an example, I think the parking ramp at the airport will be greatly appreciated for multiple reasons, but a lot of it is accessible, things like that. So I do think.
But to be clear, you're not promising a parking garage as part of this project right away, right? Because we didn't plan on that. I mean, except later, maybe.
No, but this is a discussion point that I think that there's ways that we can look at this and try to incorporate it in the project. So I'm not trying to get you into trouble, but I do think it's an issue. Well, not every February is like it is right now. And so the accessibility, especially, there's lots of people that need to have it. So,
well, I think the idea of a covered drop-off is super important, which would be a great suggestion. So we've noted that.
I think, again, my personal opinion would be if there were a parking garage and there was a cost to park there, that wouldn't be something as an event planner that I think would be a disadvantage to hosting an event there. I think people would expect that, appreciate that, right? Like after coming out of a gala or a large event, the last thing you want to do is scrape a bunch of snow off your window in high heels and fancy clothes. So, I don't think that would be a drawback if there was a cost associated with the parking to wanting to plan something there.
Charlie, I'd just say, the parking garage discussion that's just being brought up, and the developers that are listening, every foot of development and density can be factored into the profitability of a project. And so depending on what the proposals are, I don't think you throw it out or automatically consider it personally, because if somebody's got the right development strategy and a parking garage serves that and this facility, that could be the best course.
That, of course, is where a further incentive would come into play, right? Yeah.
Not to beat this horse to death, but I do think if you could speak, I'm guessing that when the weather is inclement, that affects your attendance, and if it's a nice day, there are some people that they aren't going to attend if they are worried about having to go out. So maybe you can talk, because I do think this is a legit issue, especially in North Dakota. And so if you could talk a little bit about, it might seem like kind of a superficial thing, but I think it's a legit thing.
I can say even personally, I think about if I have a ticket to go to a chamber event that's during lunch and I run late in a meeting and know that I've got 10 minutes to get there, but that 600 other people are there and I'm not going to be able to find a parking spot or I might skip it altogether because it just isn't going to work. And so I think, again, the flexibility and creativity we can get around embracing our weather and how we make that really enjoyable for people and accessible for people. Again, safety would be my first top of mind reason for doing it, but I do think there's a reality that comes with parking challenges and how they affect event attendance.
A multitude of options and alternates can be included in an RFP or whatever might come forward, whether it's a parking garage or, as you said earlier, Jaquel, a number of entrance points. So it's not one huge parking lot where you have to walk a mile, in wind out there like is today. That there could be a variety of different options considered, and you could wage that out and check it against your budget. I mean, if you have 10 different entry doors with 5 parking lots or something, it maybe isn't as cost effective to push the snow that way, but it might add to user enjoyment and more fulfillment and be cheaper than, a parking garage. But to have the options and the alternates, that's part of any building project, I think.
There's no question that parking will be part of the RFP. I mean, you're required to have a certain number of parking places, and I guess how they address it, we'll see how we phrase that in the RFP based on what we're hearing here today, right?
Well, under the issue of, and I'm looking at Mike, my buddy Mike, that we went to college together, the issue you brought up about ranking and rating, 15% to this issue, 10% to this issue. In community planning and development, we've been building a lot of affordable housing across the community, and there are certain amounts of parking spaces that are needed. It's one spot per bedroom in an apartment, if you will, and then a certain amount per square footage of what you have going on in other places, and Mike would know that better than I do. But when we build an affordable housing initiative in the community, we have to do a market study about what's the walkability, what's the access to employment opportunities, what's access to bus route, what's the access to all sorts of different things that I think Mike knows better than I do. But I'm sure there's something similar that exists for community-based initiatives like what you're talking about. Now, I've not been a part of these meetings and feel like I don't know these things, but there has to be something in community planning and development that's related. There certainly is in housing that we have to know.
I would just add, well said, Aaron, I think that's a great summary, but this is where HVS can kind of help inform best practice and what it is you really need for facility requirements. They're the topical experts. They're the people that when we get a really good RFP, whether that be developed by a national firm, as well as getting some help from a group like HVS, they can really help inform what it is Fargo should be thinking about. So there's no surprises, because the thing that we want to avoid is surprises down the road where we don't have the right site that looks at the kind of right layouts, and we have those challenges. And I appreciate all the comments made about some of the larger events and weather. I think we've all experienced it, and I appreciate your comment specifically about the large chamber event. It's hard to get in and out of and keep on schedule, especially as many of you, I know our people too, we're scheduled every single hour of every single day, and we need to keep moving. So it's just how do we do that and do that efficiently? And I think that's by getting some really, really good subject matter expertise and third-party review. So I would strongly recommend that for this committee and for the city commission.
Can I add one other lower on the level wish list item?
Absolutely.
I've been planning events regionally and nationally for 20 plus years, and I think one of the challenges we have when it comes to large events is almost like a home base business center type space. I'm thinking something that has a safe that we could lock up. I mean, at our last event, we had $100,000 worth of cash that there's no place to put it. And I'm certainly not going to go to the venue and say, hey, can you hold on to this for me? I think about a conference room table with AV needs to plug in, perhaps a copy, or things that when you are off-site and away, when you're planning a big event, you kind of move into that space for 2 days, a space to sit and talk with vendors that isn't out in the open and everybody can find you and grab you and disrupt you. But I think if there's something that's multifunctional that could use in that way, that would definitely be a draw to that space of just supporting that event business, and I imagine would be very desirable for a lot of off-site larger clients that are coming here. The hospitality aspect is what we're known for in Fargo-Moorhead. So how can we make that a really savvy central place for meeting planners and event contacts to do business, but do it well and safely?
And I'm going to move that up on the list as well, because that is really important. In addition to that, security as well. I've worked or done a gala where you're setting up 2 days before for a silent auction, and we've had things stolen and there wasn't proper security. So then we're out a, $5,000 necklace and whatnot. So I'm moving that one up.
Okay.
I have one more. One more. It's kind of on that same line. Can any of you speak to, I know Shannon had mentioned this at one of the last ones, but contracts and how you do work with all the different vendors? Can you use some pros and cons on how it's best worked in the past? I know it's been, if we have preferred vendors, if we have an exclusive, if we have free reign, can you guys give us some pros and cons on how that works coming from a vendor side? And I know how it, when you're working with all these different elements, it's not really a question, but I think you guys maybe get my point.
I think you need to be more specific in your question, because I could take it a number of different directions in my response. I think what you're asking is, in vendor flexibility contracts, do you want there to be a roster of, say, 20 that we would work with, or unlimited, and what are the pros and cons to that?
Or master contract with others under it.
I think having ultimate flexibility so we could utilize any business that would want to be helpful to us, because as Jaquel said, there's a number of businesses that are just incredibly giving across our community, and some of those support us and, the Ronald McDonald. Some support United Way and Ronald McDonald. It just really varies. And so the larger flexibility, the better is my judgment. What doesn't exist today is that flexibility, which is why I think all of us are talking about it. We are locked in to what is at that venue, and that is our only option. We don't want that to be how it is in the future.
And oftentimes, that only option is not a local option. So I think that's the hard part for me, is to send my dollars to a different community when I could support here. Personally, I think I would echo the flexibility. I have found it helpful planning things in other cities when there's a preferred vendor, right? Somebody that knows the space, works in the space, can do it well. So, I think how do we be inviting to others if there is a list of preferred vendors? I think that's very helpful. Now, the process for which you come about that, could be difficult, but I think that's just being hospitable.
On Jaquel's point, we see preferred vendor lists commonly at different venues that we work in around the country. They may be preferred vendors, sure, but we're still there and doing the work, right? So we're still able to work in the space. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, I think it's to everybody's advantage, otherwise I'm trying to stay out of this conversation. Thanks, everybody, by the way. But I think it's to everybody's advantage to be able to bring in whatever business wants to come to Fargo, whatever vendors they want to bring to Fargo, please do. You're welcome to be here. Yeah, I think that's a big advantage. So.
Yeah, but you want to make sure your vendors have some familiarity with your building. So you'd want to have a list of some kind ahead of time, right? Yeah.
I think to the earlier point of having a really solid event coordination process,
Yeah.
right? Having the right documentation in place. That's how we're able to walk into a new convention center that we've never been to in some cases and fly our rigging equipment, bring in our technology and be off to the races. So.
Standard contracts in a lot of places, are there?
Meaning what exactly? What do you mean?
When they go so a venue would have a standard contract for whoever the vendor was, whoever the caterer was, whoever the AV vendor was. Would they have a standard contract that, that people have to deal with, right? That's generally speaking.
Yeah, typically they, will be requested to provide a COI, sign some certification, that sort of thing, right? That we agree to X, Y, and Z, if that's what you're referring to as an outside vendor. Yeah, very common in that way.
Okay.
I think just to piggyback on something Kent said, I think the staffing part of it, once this is open, is a highly critical function of getting good quality people that know the industry, that know the community, representing the community. I would put at the top of the priority, right? We are people helping people do things for people. And so I think having a knowledgeable, friendly, flexible, accommodating person that's willing to represent Fargo, not only for the local community of, being able to trust your event contact. I mean, in this industry, oftentimes who you work with one year from event to event changes quite frequently. And I think if we can find a really nice team that can do what we do best here, would be really important.
Anything else on this topic? We could do a few more minutes on this.
Charlie, can I put in one more wish list item?
You may.
I'm going to advocate for a pre-function area as well. Something outside of the main event space where event attendees are able to gather before the event starts, where the registration process happens, etc.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard. We certainly are considering that to be part of it for whether it's a local or a roll-in event. Because people need a place for registration, they need a place for social events. Hopefully you'd have a couple different options for that in the building, but yeah, you definitely have to have pre-function space, so we're gonna make sure that's part of the design. That's part of what we're trying to do for those of you who haven't been at the other meetings, trying to determine, how much meeting space do we want, and then what do we need to support it in forms of pre-function, catering kitchen. We talked about that a lot at the last meeting. And came up with 10 to 15,000, 10 to 12, 13,000 square feet of catering kitchen space, which was probably more than we thought we would need. And that's also something HVS is going to address for us. But then also the question came up about, hallways, service hallways, how you get from place to place. Loading docks are extremely important. I don't know how it'll end up, but I have friends who've worked in the event business who've said to me, you have to have two loading docks. I'm like, okay. We'll see. But we at least have to have one really good one. And as Kent said, with access that is not, 5,000 steps away from where it is that you're going to be putting the stuff. You have to have easy access to things, elevators and that kind of stuff if you have multiple floors. And of course, there'll be lower level storage probably. So anyway, yes, that's all part of the deal for sure. We're just trying to determine how much, that's kind of what we're after here. And then how we're going to pay for it. All depending on how much it is, that's really what we have to weigh all the stuff against what kind of money we're going to have to deal with. And yes, the mayor brought up the idea of, land costs could come into this depending on who's bidding. And I think we'll see a variety of things in that regard. So we're trying to maintain as much flexibility as we can and still have basic requirements for things, like including parking, of course. So, okay. All right, you guys are welcome to stay. You don't have to leave. We only have a few minutes left. We try to get done by 2 o'clock anyway. So we want to talk about a little bit about our trip. So March 24th, 25th, mark your calendars. Monday, we are going to send everyone on the committee a calendar invitation. You're all familiar with those? That works for everybody, right? So that's going to be the RSVP, and hopefully you would let us know by close of business next Wednesday of whether or not you'll be able to come along. We're arranging hotel rooms. We're on the verge of hiring a bus. It'll be a coach bus. There should be plenty of room for everybody. Maybe we can each have our own row, in case you don't want to talk to anybody. I'll go around and talk to you, don't worry. So we have a bus lined up, and our plan would be to leave. We'll start from our office, the visitor center parking lot. We got a lot of room for parking out there. And the bus will be there. I think we'll probably leave at 8 or 8:30. We'll see what happens. And then we want to be in St. Cloud by noon. So that would be the plan. They're going to meet us for a tour at 12:30 at the River's Edge. And then at 1:30, Rachel Thompson, the CEO of Visit St. Cloud, will be there to talk to us about how they work. And then we'll have some meetings with them, and we'll speak with them until we're done. And then we'll hit the road for Rochester, where we will find dinner somewhere, check into the hotel, and then the next morning we'll meet with our friends at the Mayo Civic Center. And they will give us a tour and answer questions. And when we're done, then we'll head home. And we'll try to work meals in to these things. We haven't gotten that far yet, but we will try not to let you go hungry. So anybody have questions about that? Hopefully we'll be home on that Tuesday by 6 p.m., no later than 7 p.m. That would be my goal. It kind of depends on how long we end up talking at the Mayo. So,
Charlie, I'm not saying everybody has to do it, but if an organization could cover their own overnight, I'll do my own.
Thank you for bringing that up. If you feel like your organization would support, hopefully the city will cover the commissioners and staff costs for the hotel rooms. Joe, if you can, maybe Shannon can too. But we understand that some of you we invited to be on the committee, and we're ready to cover as many of the hotel rooms as we have to at Visit Fargo-Moorhead. But we certainly appreciate anyone who has expensive money in their accounts that can take care of this sort of thing. So we can work that out individually, but thanks for bringing that up. So, I mean, we're not going to tell anybody, we're going to cover the rooms. If you can, we'll leave it up to you if you want to help us out. But I'm kind of counting on the city for sure. Right, Michael?
If Dave will let me take it out of the budget, we can do it.
Okay. So what else is on here that we haven't, the RFP outline, that's available on the website, and it's also in these materials, right? Yep. This is just the outline that Jim Gilmore put together, and we went back and forth a little bit. This is a bare bones outline, but it's something for you to look at as we move forward with this. And I'm not looking at it myself right now, but thank you.
Charlie,
We'll make some reference to land in here somewhere.
Yeah, I assume the comments shared today that were new will just get added to this list.
We'll be adding stuff to it for sure. Jim is not here. I think, he couldn't be with us today, but we'll talk to him about some of the things that have come up today with regard to this. And also, we'll probably run it by, since our friends at HVS are willing to help us with this, I'll run it by them too, because they've got a lot of experience with this kind of stuff. So as long as we're paying them, we might as well get our money's worth. Yes. Mayor, were you going to comment on something? Okay. I saw your green light was on. I thought maybe you're... Okay. Anything, is there any other business we need to deal with today?
I was just going to extend our thanks and gratitude to you ladies for sharing your input. Things like a business center, I wouldn't have thought of. Like, those are great ideas. So next week, just so you all know, we're inviting 3 association planners from the state of North Dakota. We've got the League of Cities, the Association of Counties, and the Emergency Medical Services Association. So those 3 people will be joining us virtually. So we get more of an idea of, rather than the grand big scale events, but more of those that are needing the breakout space, the expo hall, and so forth. So we'll kind of get their perspective as well next week. So thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you. And those ones next week are people from events you might recognize that we've held up as things that we haven't been able to host here before. So we want to hear from them and find out what their requirements are. Last week we kind of got hung up on the number 4,000 people at an event. That's not going to happen very often. I want to make sure everybody understands that. It's not necessarily the number of people, and I know some of you have heard me say this before, but it's not necessarily the number of people at the conference or convention that is the problem. It's the requirements they have for space outside of that. And that means, again, that we need general session space that can deal with, at least 1,000, maybe more. And we have an equal amount of exhibit space. That's the place we've fallen short so many times for out-of-town meetings especially. Sometimes local planners have some sponsors and want exhibit space too. And then also the breakout space to go with it. So it's not that we're going to have 4,000 people every month, but it's that we need space for the things that pay for their convention, the sponsors that pay for their convention. It looks like Aaron would like to comment on this.
Well, you said, room for 1,000 in the general space. You need at least that.
Oh, yeah, we're
Tables, not lined up in chairs
Right.
saying, oh, this is the capacity.
No.
You need north of that at tables.
I scared you, didn't I? I'm
Yes.
sorry, yes. No, we will have room for more than that, but what I'm saying is we're not going to have a lot of 3,000 or 4,000 person events, at least not to begin with. Oh, please, let us have some of those. Hopefully we'll be able to accommodate those, but I think I want to make sure everybody's expectations are on the right level here. This isn't just about attracting something with 2,000 to 4,000 people. It's about having the space they need for the 500 to 2,000 person event in order to make it work. And that's kind of what we're after. So, and also there might be multiple events at one time in an event. We talked about that when the caterers were here last week. So that informs some of our kitchen needs as well.
So
Okay.
I know the list that I referenced on that website of a long list of things that we just cannot or have, haven't had the ability to accommodate for in the last however long we've been keeping that list. But I just kind of pulled a summary for you because I know it's bite size. Generally, like Charlie said, the expo is a huge component. Typically, it's around 60 up to 125 exhibits per trade show. So that's 25,000. 44,000 was the Emergency Medical Services Association, which would, 44,000 square feet would be huge. But those are the kinds of events where it's like they have to have the general session and the expo hall. And then typically the average for breakout rooms was around, 7 to 10 generally, and each one fitting at least 150 people, theater style. So that's kind of just your scope of what an average convention would look like from what we're currently working with and going towards.
But we definitely want to be able to have the local events grow as part of this process. So yes, more than 1,000, for sure, yeah. Yeah, no.
Charlie and Mallory, is there anything we as local organizations can do to continue to stay involved or help and support the work that you guys are doing moving forward?
Well, pay attention. You know, these meetings are open to the public. You're welcome to come anytime you want. And if you have questions, reach out to us. And if you think we're doing something wrong, tell us. Or if we think we're missing something, we wouldn't do anything wrong.
I think
But we
when
might miss something, so don't be shy, you know.
when the RFP is ready to be sent out, we'll probably share that with you guys and those people that would potentially use the convention center so that we can get your feedback at that point too. Like, it's great to hear from you now and put that into process of including it in the RFP, but when we're done, it would be great to have your feedback then too.
And by the way, the page we're talking about, Mallory said, you know, it's not, you have to search it. I'm going to talk to our staff and see about changing that so there's an easy way. So, because I think the public should be able to see what's going on here too. And I know they can get it through the city website, but we want to be open, so we want to have a place where you can go. And do not hesitate to call us if you have questions. Or if you think we're making it too small. Aaron, don't worry, that's not our plan.
You just scared me a little because
Yeah, no,
you can have 1,000 people now in some of the venues locally. So the goal is to increase from there, to expand the events that we have to raise more dollars. to
Absolutely.
support our work.
And
And thank you for the invite, everyone.
Of course. And so you were looking at 3,000 to 4,000 people at one of your events. That's good. I like that. It's good. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? If not, we will adjourn and we'll see you next Friday. Look for that, committee members, look for that calendar invitation, and make sure you respond by Wednesday about whether you're coming with us on our little tour on the 24th and 25th. Thank you.